This is the fifth in the beginning programming series of videos about Octagon. And in this video, we're going to learn about variables. For more information, visit jb.works and at the search prompt, type in the TMT code shown at the bottom of the screen. So before we start learning about variables, we really need to ask, why do we even need them? Variables let programs be very flexible because the world that we're in and the world that computers exist in is never stationary, it's never constant. And so programs need to be able to deal with this continual change. They need to be able to accept input from users and from things in the outside world, like temperature sensors, cars, sensors, cameras, all sorts of things. So from the perspective of the first program that we learned about in the fourth video, this program only prints hello world. It never changes. It has no variables in it. It does one thing and one thing only. Whereas for a computer to be useful, we need it to be able to accept input from all over the place. And to do that, you use variables. So what are variables? Basically, variables hold information. That's all they do. They let you store information. And they also let you change that information as a program is running. So in the real world, you could think of a program with no variables being like a poster. Once that poster is printed, like this one over here, keep calm and carry on, it will never change. It will always have that information. It will always say the same thing. That's a program with no variables, so it just does the same thing over and over again. A program with variables is more like a whiteboard because you can put a whole lot of stuff on it and then you can change it, you can add to it, subtract from it, you can completely erase it and start from scratch and do something different. So variables let you A, store information in a program, and B, change it as the program is running, which is really useful. In this simple example program, it's basically the same as the Hello World program that we ran earlier, except that instead of printing just Hello World, it prints two names, one after the other. So what we'll do now is get the program, run it, and then we'll see how it works. To get the example program, adopt your JackBord and go to the dashboard. Once there, click on the Prog tab, which will take you to the program page. Then make sure that you're on a slot where you don't mind losing what's already there. And then after you've done that, go over to the Guide tab and at the search prompt, type hello name. This is the name of the program. And then press enter. And when the result comes up, click on it. Now we want to select all of the code, copy it, then go over to the left-hand side, select all of that code, delete it, and then paste in the code for our program. And finally, click the Save button to save it. Now that we've got the program loaded, let's run it and see what happens. So to run it, click on the rocket at the top of the prog page, and the program will run. And the first thing it does is it prints out hello Jack, then hello Jill, and finally bye Jill. So one thing to keep in mind about the print tab is that the most recent thing always appears at the top. And that just makes it easier to find out the most recent thing that's happened. So now that we've seen the program run and that it works differently from the Hello World program we did before, let's see how it works. For those of you who have just watched the previous video, the first thing you'll notice is that in our new program, there is a new task called prog vars. And what this is it's a place in Octagon where you declare variables. And when I say you declare a variable, basically you're creating a variable. You're telling Octagon that you want to have this variable and you want it to store some information. So right here, this is the line where we actually declare the variable. So first of all, we have the D and a slash, and then the name of the variable. And in this case, the name just happens to be name. And then the value, the first value that we give it is Jack in quotation marks. And what that does is that tells Octagon that we have a new variable called name and that it will be a text variable because we're storing text in it the first time that Octagon sees it. Now all variables in Octagon start with a slash, and you can see that here. And the little D in front basically tells Octagon that we are declaring this variable. And we're going to learn about that next. And then the last thing to take away from this is that any variables that you create in the prog.vars task are global, and all that means is that you can use them in any part of your program. Now, the first thing we need to look at with variables is how we declare them. And when you're declaring a variable, all you're doing is telling Octagon about the variable that you want it to use. So variables in Octagon are declared by putting a D in front of the variable name. And a normal variable, or just an average variable, has the name slash followed by a name. So this line here, when we want to declare a variable, you go D slash and then the name of the variable, followed by its value. So down here in our program, we have D slash name, which means we want to create a text variable called name. And what tells Octagon that it's a text variable is the fact that the value we set it to is Jack, in quotes, and that's text. So basically the value tells Octagon what type of variable it is. So here are some other examples of declaring different types of variable. So for example, we have D slash age and we're setting it to 0. And what that does is it creates an integer variable called age and sets its value to 0. And by setting its value to 0 with no decimal point, we're telling Octagon that it's going to be an integer. And likewise, D slash height has got 0.0, which is a floating point value, as in it has decimals after a floating point or after a decimal point. And it's called height. So we have a floating point variable called height, and we're setting its initial value to 0.0. And finally, a text variable, which we already know about, so we're creating one called D slash address, or the variable's called address, and it's a text variable, and its initial value is set to ADR. So just to recap what we've covered so far, first of all, variables store information, and they let you organize and store information in your programs. And the variables in Octagon can hold integers, which are whole numbers, floating points, which are decimal numbers with decimal points, and then finally text values, which are things like hello world or someone's name. So these are the types of variable that you have in Octagon. So now let's carry on and look at the rest of the program. Next, we come to the prog start task, and this, as you'll remember from last time, is where Octagon always begins running the setup stuff for the program, so the things that you want to have set up, or in this case it's going to run everything we want to do. So the first thing we do is the pclear command just clears the print tab and gets rid of any text that was there from previous runs. This next line, print and then hello and then slash name, it prints the value of the name variable. So you'll notice when we ran it, we didn't see hello slash name, we saw hello Jack. Or later on we saw hello Jill. So what this is doing is Octagon looks at this line here, and as soon as it sees the slash, it says, right, this is a variable. So I'm going to replace this bit here with the value of the variable, which is Jack. And that's why it prints hello Jack. Now the line below it, which is this one here, this is where we change the value of this variable name. And remember, that was one of the main things about variables, or is the main thing, is that you can change its value while the program is running. So our program is running, we come to this line here, and we change the value of name to Jill. So that when we come down a bit further and to an identical print statement, so this print statement here is the same as this one, except that you'll recall when we ran the program, it prints hello Jill. And that's because in the line above it, which is this guy, we changed the value of the name variable to Jill. So what we've done is while our program is running, we've changed the value of the variable. And finally, we come to the prog stop task. And as you recall from last time, in Octagon, the prog stop task is always the last task that gets run by any program. And it's where you clean things up, do your last bits. So what our one does here is it says print by, but then we've added slash name, and that's the variable. So unlike the previous example of the Hello World program, which literally just said by, our one says by Jill. And that's because the last value that we had set the name variable to was Jill. And so there you have it. Again, it changes the behavior of the program just by changing the value of the variable. So now let's take a look at the whole program and we'll go through it. So let's look through the program in its entirety. So the first thing we have at the top, as we did before, is a multi-line comment. Then next we have the new prog_vars task, and that is the one where you tell Octagon about the variables that you want to create. And in this case we've got d/name Jack. So we're creating a text variable called name and its value is Jack. Then we come out of prog_vars and go into prog_start. And we have the usual PC clear, which basically clears the print tab on the prog page. And then the next thing we do is we go print the name. So we print hello/name, and the /name is the variable that we're printing, and that is Jack. And as we saw before, it printed Jack. And then here we're changing the value of name to Jill. And so on the next line down, even though this statement here is identical to this one, when it runs, because we changed the value of name to Jill, it prints hello Jill, and that's what we saw. Finally, we come to the end of prog_start and then prog_stop. Now again, this is where it's a little different from the original hello world example, and that is that we say by/name, and it will say by Jill, because Jill is the last value that we gave to name. And so that is the overall structure of the program. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to play around with the code, because I often find that the best way to learn about something is to actually change it and break it and muck around and just see how it works. So what we're going to do is we'll go and change some of the variable values, and we'll add some new variables and then display the values of the new variables. So by doing this, by playing with the code and not worrying about breaking it, you're going to learn a lot more. If you do manage to somehow completely break it, don't worry, just go back a few steps, reload the original code and carry on. So we're back here with the original program. So the first thing I'm going to do is, currently it prints hello Jack, Jill, and then by Jill. So the first thing I'm going to do is just change this. So we'll change it to Fred. So now it should say hello Fred, and there we go, hello Fred. And it's still saying hello Jill and by Jill. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we'll just change Jill to Pam. And then I click on the run button. And remember, the run button saves and runs the program. So now it's saying Fred, hello Pam, and by Pam. And that's because we changed the value of the name variable up here where we declared it to Fred. We then printed it, so hello Fred. Then we came down here and changed it to Pam. And then went hello Pam, and then finally goodbye Pam, or bye Pam. So the next thing we're going to do is let's add a second name. So I'm just going to type d/name2. And we're going to call that one Terry. And what we want to do is we want to say hi to Terry as well. So we'll go hello name, then hello/name2. Now if I save and run that, it should say hello Fred Terry. Okay, maybe I think we need to say hello Fred and Terry. So we'll say that again. And there we go, hello Fred and Terry. So let us come down and change that second variable, the new one, to, and we will make it, who should we make it? We should make it Glenda. And then we'll just take that, copy it, and we'll put it here. So hello, will be hello Pam and Glenda. So let's see if that works. Yeah, so what we've done is we've added a new variable here called name2, and we called it made its value Terry. Then we came down, print hello Fred and Terry, because that's Terry, that's Fred. So hello Fred and Terry. Then we come down and we change name2 to Glenda. So the next hello is hello Pam and Glenda, because when the program reaches here, the value of name2 is Glenda. And then finally, goodbye, we're still only saying goodbye to Pam. So let's say goodbye to Pam and Glenda. And we run it. And voila, so now we're saying hello Fred and Terry, hello Pam and Glenda, and then finally bye Pam and Glenda. And that's because, first of all, we changed the value of this variable here to Fred, change name to Fred. And then we added a new variable called name2, which was originally Terry, as it is right here. And then we come down, we say hello Fred and Terry. Then we change the first name to Pam and the second name to Glenda. And so when we say hello again, it's hello Pam and Glenda. And again, notice that this line here is identical to this line. And yet they're doing two different things. And that's because we changed the variable values in between. And that goes back to the whole idea of variables is number one, they store information, and number two, they let you change it. So now you guys can go away and just try adding some more variables, changing values, maybe put an age in there, that kind of thing. For more information, visit jb.works.